What's good, my ghouls and goblins? Welcome back to Really Scary. You've immediately distracted me with that. How dare you? I was going to come in with a great, tight intro, and then your bleached, white, ghoulish flesh had just totally, like I had to squint. That's how bright it was. You look great. You look great. Welcome back to Really Scared, your weekly horror movie podcast, where every single week we bring on a special guest to discuss a scary movie of their choice. As always, I am Taylor, and I am joined by the top goblin, Connor Breedlove. How you doing tonight, buddy?
I'm doing great. I've recently taken a vacation to Transylvania. The beaches are pretty crazy there. Got this nice hat there. Got a nice suntan, as you can see.
You have the complexion of the dark side of the moon. You've never looked better, though, and I'm so happy to see you. What's good in your life lately, my friend? Welcome back. We missed you last week.
Yeah, I know. I'm so sorry about that. Work's kind of crazy, and my house is being infested by ladybugs.
What is the deal with that? I am seeing ladybugs all over the place. What's going on?
They are the worst right now, and I hate them. We set up traps like around our windows on the outside and the inside.
Traps, ladybug traps?
Yeah, and then we have this dust that is supposed to destroy their joints.
Oh my god.
They can't go anywhere. So yeah, we spent hours a few days ago just setting up traps.
I didn't realize they were raining down such chaos upon your life that you actually had been trapping and destroying them.
It's been a nightmare.
Why don't you just let them in?
No.
What are they going to do?
They're awful. They smell bad. They're loud, especially at night. You can just hear them bouncing onto the light bulbs. It's fucking annoying.
Maybe you should let them in. If you're cold, they're cold, right? Let them in.
No, let them freeze.
The real question is not where do they come from? It's what are they running from? Who knows?
Good question.
Who knows what they would tell you if you would just listen? Favorite ghoul in the chat. What's going on, Jessica? Thank you so much for watching the show from 2 stories above my head. Love you. Appreciate you. Thanks for watching. Hey, I saw a new horror movie just this past week, a little flick by the name of Antlers. Have you seen Antlers by chance?
I haven't seen Antlers yet. I really want to. I finally watched Old, and I really liked it.
You know what? I still have not seen Old.
You know what? As much hate as it's gotten, I don't understand it. I thought it was good. I liked it.
It sounds like a wild ride, and I have no problem signing up for that kind of thing. Yeah. Where's that at? Is that streaming somewhere these days?
I just rented it. It's $5.
Okay. I do need to catch up with good old. George Thomas in the chat. All you dudes own Yeti?
I have 2 Yetis.
Of course. You can't be in the podcast game without your Yeti microphone. And
Yeti microphone. Yeah, I have a Yeti microphone, and I have 2 Yeti drinking devices.
Oh, okay. Perfect. We all got Yetis. Love to see it. I did see Antlers, and I thought it was all right. I thought it was decent. I went down a Wendigo rabbit hole a few years ago where I was super just infatuated with that mythology and that legend, and I was excited to see what a new horror film would do with that material, and I thought they did all right. The monster stuff and the effects and the gore and all that was really well done. There was some very genuinely scary scenes in it, I would say, and I liked it all right. Did
you go to the theaters, or is it streaming anywhere?
I saw that in the theater. I think it's another one of those Fox movies that's gotten zero marketing or promotion and is just silently in theaters. You hate to see it. A sad story. George says we need to talk to him about a sponsorship. I would love to have a Yeti sponsorship. I would love to be sponsored by an actual Yeti. I've talked on this show about actual Yetis before. That would be fine too. I'd be happy to talk about some Yetis some more. We got a great show for you tonight, folks. Like I said, joined by a special guest every single week, and this week is no exception. We are welcoming a man you may know as the Coyote, a competitor and former champion in the movie Trivia Schmoedown, as well as the co-host of Why Are We Like This, alongside Video Drew, another former guest on this show as well. Ghouls and Goblins, put your hands together for the great Adam Collins. How you doing, sir?
Thank you kindly. I'm very happy to be here. Can you hear me okay still?
You sound crystal.
Yeah,
you
you
sound
sound
amazing.
fantastic.
Okay, excellent. Got this awesome 2.5-star hotel internet coming through strong, so I'm grateful for it. But yeah, I really was excited when you reached out about doing an episode and giving me a chance to spread the good word about a film that's very dear to me for a lot of reasons. So can't wait to go deep on this, nerd out a bit, and see what you guys thought.
Yeah, for sure. I'm excited for this one because when we started working this format where we'd have guests pick out movies, I knew it would only be a matter of time before somehow, some way we got to Nosferatu, and I would love an excuse to go back and revisit that classic, and obviously just something kind of different to talk about. A silent film from the 20s, not something we get an opportunity to do much on this show. And in addition to that, we're going to also be primarily talking about the Werner Herzog version, which I have never seen at all prior to this episode. So completely uncharted territory for me. So I'm excited. And thank you for coming on this week.
Oh, yeah.
We're so excited to have you. And when we do this, something I always just like to ask, because that is the idea of the show, the guests pick the films, and it's always interesting to hear why. Why, when posed with the prompt of picking a horror film, was Nosferatu the Vampyre your choice?
Because it's a film that most people haven't seen. A lot of people have heard about it.
Yeah.
But your average film fan hasn't actually seen the film start to finish. Good amount of people have seen the original silent film. But the reason I wanted to put this on people's radar wasn't because I think it's going to be a movie that resonates with everybody, which we'll delve into, but because Werner Herzog is personally one of my favorite filmmakers. He's got such a diverse body of work, and he's been making films since the late 60s, and he's still at it when he isn't showing up as, cryptic villains in Jack Reacher and The Mandalorian, which is also really entertaining stuff. But I really love the 70s and 80s specifically with Herzog's films, and he did about a half dozen collaborations with Klaus Kinski, the star of this film, and it kind of is a unique film even within their small body of work together. So I just have a lot of passion for this movie and for the guy who made it, and for the source material and the lasting legacy of the basically this version of Count Dracula.
Right. And when you think of what a crazy endeavor and tall task it is to say, like, for what is considered commonly perhaps the first proper horror film by a lot of people, certainly the first vampire film, the first pseudo adaptation of Dracula, and as I understand with Herzog, what he considered like the greatest German film of all time. So to say, okay, I'm going to step up to the plate and I'm going to do one. What a crazy, something that a guy like Herzog would certainly do. It doesn't seem as much intimidates the guy, but what a crazy task. This has always kind of eluded me. I always heard about it. Like you'd said, I'd wondered about it, but never quite found the good time to sit down and watch this movie. So I was eager to do so. And first of all, if anybody hasn't seen it, we'll obviously do spoilers on the movie, but if you haven't seen it, this movie is extremely easy to watch right now. There's no excuses. Free on Peacock, on Tubi, free on 2 apps. Like, holy shit. So
Shudder, I think, has it.
Oh, really? Shudder as well. This movie implores you to watch it if you haven't already. It's out there. It is waiting for you. So go find it. And Herzog is actually, as far as his filmography goes, it sounds like you're a pretty big fan. Not to show my hand too much, but kind of a blind spot for me as well. Like I know, Grizzly Man. I know kind of a bit about him as a person. Like you said, I know his sort of on-screen roles. But beyond that, I don't have a lot of insight into him as a filmmaker as much as I perhaps would like to. So this was kind of a perfect starting point for me because it's fucking Nosferatu. Connor, had you ever seen the classic silent film prior to? Because I had seen it before, but it had been many, many years since I'd seen it.
I've seen it forever ago. I think probably at my grandparents. I did not know this one existed. so this was the first time I watched it. And I took notes.
Yeah, I'm sure you did. I took many notes as well.
A lot to unpack.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was sort of revisiting the original today and realized that this is very much kind of a one-to-one proper remake of that movie. Like, it really hits a lot of the same beats and even recreates a lot of the same shots, but just obviously the filmmaking conventions and potential between a 20s movie and a 70s movie, just by nature of doing a new one, really kind of changes the language of the movie. And it's got kind of this, like, I don't mean this in a critical way, but it's got sort of this like period piece, almost like PBS movie charm in places. Did you pick that up at all?
Yeah.
That's kind of, if you go back and watch a lot of Herzog's work from the 70s, especially, you'll see a lot of this. He stages his actors a lot. Like he'll hold the shot and kind of do long takes of these actors, and he will pile the extras into the background because he wants there to be a lot to observe when you rewatch his films too. And there's so many interesting extras in this movie that have no dialogue and just kind of stare. But that's kind of part of the style of this era of his films.
A lot of long sort of establishing meditative shots too, like really a really patient, taking its time. I don't want to say slowly paced, but definitely is not rushing towards any kind of conclusion. It's like, if we're going to show a ship coming into the dock, we're going to really hold on that ship, and we're going to see, you're going to get to admire every little intricate detail of that ship before you finally see the captain slumped over and dead at the wheel. Or even just the beginning of this movie. It has this crazy, I thought, juxtaposition in the opening titles where it starts off with like these long shots of real mummies. I learned from a museum in Mexico, I think. That apparently Herzog had like actually gone in and like taken out of the cases and staged, and I just imagine like the chaos of a man coming in and unpacking your mummies.
I can imagine he's very convincing.
Yeah, very adamant.
He's fluent in I think 5 or 6 languages, including Spanish. So, I just imagine, after he was talking about the mummies for like 10 minutes, they're like, okay, just bring them back.
Sure, go play with our mummies. And then once you get through that, it cuts to, still within the opening title sequence, kittens. That is the duality.
And that's a great callback to the silent film, because there's a lot of shots of kittens in that. Now, I just want to say something about the silent film. That's something worth noting. There's different versions of that film that you can see, as you can imagine. There have been many different releases over the years. And there's a few really nice DVD and Blu-ray releases you can get with like music that's a bit more polished and stuff like that. But what I prefer is to find a cut of the original film with the original character names, which is becoming increasingly rare. If you watch this streaming, they have corrected all of the names to be the characters from Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Oh, really?
So all the character names in Herzog's film are as they're intended. He used the actual character names, switched a few things around like Lucy and Mina and stuff. But in the original film, it was Thomas, not Jonathan. It was Greta, not Nina. And it was Count Orlok, famously, not Count Dracula. So if you go back and watch the streaming version of the 22 film, you're going to see it corrected to match the source material. The way it's intended really is with different character names entirely. But Herzog, that was one thing I thought was interesting that he changed, that he wanted to use the actual character names in his version.
Yeah. And that caught me off guard. I didn't know that initially, but pretty early on, you get Renfield coming in, who's very classic, sort of the archetype of the vampire familiar or henchman. So I was like, "Whoa, Renfield!" And he dropped the name Dracula, and I was like, "Whoa! I didn't know we were playing with these guys in this movie." It's obviously very famously what to get around copyright. Nosferatu, as you said, changed all the character names, and even in spite of it, had like the Stoker estate chasing it down across the country, trying to destroy every copy.
It's a miracle it survived. Yeah.
A lot of movies from that era obviously didn't got lost or destroyed along the way. So it's amazing that one's persevered and managed to build a legacy that, even for a general audience, I don't think exists for a lot of 1920s silent films, right? But like the iconography of that character is just so strong. I mean, even if people don't know the name of it, they see it and it strikes you. You can place it. You're like, I have seen this before. Goddamn SpongeBob SquarePants includes Nosferatu. I knew Connor was gonna be like,
that's my introduction to Nosferatu with SpongeBob.
Could be. You know what? That could be. I mean, I'm young enough to where that could be true. That could be where I technically first saw Nosferatu, was in a SpongeBob SquarePants skit. So he's timeless in that way for all generations.
My gateway drug was Are You Afraid of the Dark? So before I ever saw the film, I saw the episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark? The Tale of Midnight Madness, I think is what it's called. And it's about, a weird man, Dr. Vink, if anyone remembers the show. And we talked about this on our show, Why Are We Like This? But he brings a film to this theater that's failing and says, play this movie and it'll fill the seats. And if it does well, all I ask is that you let me show more of my films. And the film starts playing, and the secret to its success is that the vampire comes out of the movie and like stalks around the theater. And I remember seeing that and then finding out about the silent film some years later and just being immediately enraptured with it, realizing like how old it was. And because it's so old, there's something about it when I watch it that just feels like I'm witnessing like something out of like a dream. Like, and that's what I love about that era of films, like Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, very, popular film from the similar era. They just have a very dreamlike quality to them that I think Herzog's version nails quite well, because these people seem hypnotized through this movie.
Yeah, it does have that cadence to where like nobody really speaks like anybody you would know. Nobody really responds in the way that you think people would respond. Like it definitely puts it in this weird other realm, especially with the original. I mean, you think now, and for a horror film, from the 20s, everything is, and I don't mean this as a bad thing, it's just naturally everything's so derivative of what came before. And you have something like that where it's like nothing came before, right? In terms of filmmaking, there's nothing like that. So it's somebody really truly creating something original. Like I would love, if I could get in the time machine, I would love to sit in like a opening night screening of Nosferatu in 1922 and like see how people would process that and respond to truly seeing something they could never have experienced before, short of reading the Stoker novel, and maybe hearing folklore or legends and things like that. But, nothing predates Nosferatu that is like Nosferatu. And then on the flip side, you have this, which is a proper remake and homage. And I while also being perhaps even more of an adaptation of Dracula. And I mentioned Renfield earlier, and I just got to start by shouting out the performance of Renfield in this, because holy shit, that guy rules. How'd you like Renfield, Connor? I feel like that was just your guy.
Renfield. One, he's making really shitty puns.
He's got bits. He's got bits.
Like, oh, it's going to cost you a little bit of blood. And then his laugh. Jesus Christ, his laugh is
amazing.
Honestly, like it's such a good laugh, and he's so happy all the time. He's laughing all the time. The last time I laughed that like he did was when I watched Hoobie Halloween. That is the last time I laughed like that. And he's laughing like that all the time. Like, I wish I had that.
I do love. I feel like if I were Nosferatu and my boy was out here doing tasks for me, and he was going to people, he was setting up this big elaborate deal where I was going to, buy some property and start a plague. And he was saying stuff like, it'll take a little sweat or maybe a little blood, a winky winky. I'd be like, dude, calm down, Renfield. Like you're giving it away.
You see that later on in the movie when he finally gets there, and like Renfield comes up to him and he's like, get the fuck off me.
Yeah.
Yes, I do love when they finally unite for the first time, and Renfield's he's like a kitten, right? He's like literally rubbing against, and he's like it's his whole world. And Nosferatu is just like, get the fuck out! Like, I got some chores for you to do. Get out! Like, we just met and immediately leave.
Shit, get the fuck out of here!
Leave immediately. I just can't stand even looking at you, Renfield. God, you're the worst. It's
yeah, he acts like he smells. Yeah, I love Renfield as a character in all versions of Dracula. The 1931 Todd Browning version with Bela Lugosi, that Renfield's great. I love Tom Waits in the Coppola movie as Renfield. He's quite entertaining. But yeah, this guy, Roland Topa,
Roland Topa or something like that. Yeah,
he's channeling Peter Lorre hardcore.
Yeah,
in this, like the laugh, everything, the mannerisms, no coincidence there. That is a lot of Peter Lorre, which I like. And also, he pulls actual lines of dialogue from the silent version of that crazy ass Renfield with the eyebrows and the giant hair. Now, one thing worth pointing out with the Herzog's film is there are two versions out there. There's the English version and the German version, and the English version is not just a dub. He shot these things simultaneously because
isn't the laugh different between the two versions? Like, he had like a different laugh in the German version. It wasn't as crazy.
Yeah, I think he was like, because English wasn't his first language, I feel like the laugh was a little bit more accentuated in the English version to kind of make up for some of the dead air, so to speak. But like, if you watch the original German version, which you really can only watch on a physical copy, that's like the intended version, but the English version is still quite good. I've seen both, and I watched the English version, rewatched the English version for this, and it holds up quite well. But the German version the dialogue does have a little bit more rhythm and speed to it, because it's the first language of all these actors. Right. A lot of them anyway. Some of them are French, actors who speak German and French, but yeah.
Something I loved reading about was Klaus Kinski, and apparently what an absolute nightmare he was on this movie. I mean, like you'd said, Adam, apparently
he's a problem.
They've done a couple. I was surprised to learn that they have this relationship where they had done a number of films with each other, because I mean, I guess Herzog, like as we said, kind of has this reputation as a no nonsense, so it's just so surprising to me that this wasn't the first film they did together, right? Had they done something prior to it? I think.
Yeah, they'd done a few. I don't have. I may not have them all in the right order, but the first film they did, I'm pretty sure, was Aguirre, The Wrath of God, which is one of a great gateway drug to Herzog, just like this film is, in my opinion. Aguirre is a little more action-packed compared to some of his films, so it moves along quickly. But yeah, they did a bunch together, and they had a very dysfunctional relationship. But Klaus Kinski himself, at best, was a problematic guy, and a great actor with a lot of amazing performances. But if you dig into his personal relations and the way he acted on set, not an easy man to work with, and probably not the best person in the entire world ever, to be completely honest.
Yeah,
I read that Herzog intentionally would get into arguments with him because to tone down his performance. Like, he would purposely piss him off so he would get exhausted and have this calmer performance.
Yeah, sometimes it would be like he would wear him down, but sometimes he would get him going and then turn him loose as well. Fitzcarraldo is like their 3-hour epic, and then the companion documentary of that, Burden of Dreams, that talks about the making of that film and how people died making it. And Kinski is just running around threatening people's lives, and Herzog is out there monologuing about how the jungle is a metaphor for the downfall of humanity. It's amazing. Can't recommend it enough.
I've seen clips of that documentary, because it was they show clips of it in Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl, and they did like a spoof of it in that movie, and so I was like, I want to watch that movie, so I went and watched some of the documentary. I didn't actually get all the way through it, but I remember the jungle monologue.
Oh, it's a treat. It's a treat.
What a nightmare. I'd read that, I like a direct quote from Herzog, that like the rats were more well behaved on the film. which I feel morally obligated to also mention that I unfortunately learned that the rats had a really, really rough go at it.
Yeah,
on this film.
Like the rats were eating each other.
Yeah, that was
spray painted the rats or painted the rats.
Yeah, so that's not something I support, generally speaking. But like, you go back and watch a lot of films, not just Herzog's, but like you start digging into the way a lot of animals were handled on old sets. It's scary. It's scary. And yeah, he would come up with an idea and figure it out as he went along, and sometimes that was at the expense of people and creatures, sadly. But these rats, he got a lot of them together and like wanted to turn like upwards of 10,000 loose in the streets of this town in the Netherlands, and the local government was like, "Hell no, get out of here!" And I mean, the guy's utterly bananas. He's calmed down. He doesn't do that kind of stuff anymore.
Yeah,
but
he's also wants to see the baby now.
He just wants to see the baby, and he's mostly sticking to documentaries nowadays. He just films what exists, so he stays out of trouble, mostly.
Yeah, I mean, what a legend, though. I'm going to release 10,000 rats loose in your town, and they had like a crazy small crew, from what I understand, on this film too. So like, just no way they were going to control thousands of rats. Like, those rats were going to get left.
I know. It's terrifying. Like, it's like he's lucky that there wasn't an actual breakout of the plague on his own set.
Yeah. No, I'd read that they had like 16 people, aside from like 16 people in crew, aside from the actors on set, like really small. I think they were really on the go for this, right? I mean, they obviously shot it all in Europe, right, on location.
Yeah.
But had to travel quite frequently for it, and for, like you said, for some obvious reasons here and there. But I loved the authenticity of it too. It really did feel, of its, like I said, it's got this sort of historical drama quality to it, where the acting is there, and then the costume and the set design, it's all there. And I loved once Harker takes off, it really does feel like he's gone on this quest into some other world entirely.
Yeah.
I love the quality of like sitting down at the inn and talking to all the locals who are just like at a certain point gaslighting him over the existence of where he's trying to go. They're like, "Oh, I don't have any. Like, can I have one of your horses? I don't have any horses." Well, I'll give you some money for I don't have a carriage. I just love that.
That was like some like the kind of debate you read about in like a parable or something. Like I love how like at the end of that he's like, "Then I will walk," and he just goes out on his way. I love Bruno Ganz, by the way. I think he's one of the MVPs of this film. He brings a lot of subtlety to the performance in a film that's quite broad otherwise. And have either of you seen the film about Hitler and his people in the bunker, Downfall?
Oh, Downfall, yes.
Yeah, so he plays Hitler in that, and it's an amazing performance. He was nominated for Best Actor. Not a sympathetic film to Hitler at all, by the way, but very, very much worth seeing. And he's just an immensely talented actor, and this was the first film I ever saw him in. Yeah,
he's, and again, having to step up to the task of Harker, who's this very classic Dracula character, just as well as Van Helsing, who's in this a little bit.
Yeah.
Not very much. Definitely
really raggedy Van Helsing, really worn down. Like, he is not like a man of action, like barely.
Yeah, he just kind of bothered into being a vampire hunter by the end of the movie, just out of inconvenience. Kind of different than the interpretation. I mean, obviously, one can't always be Hugh Jackman, but when you think of Van Helsing, definitely not the sleepy grandpa rendition. That
Anthony Hopkins was a good Van Helsing.
Or Hopkins, right? Yeah, that's a better example. Yeah. No, I love the journey into this other world, and like the suggestion that like the castle almost doesn't even exist in the same reality as everybody else. Like, like once he, in some shots it seems sort of derelict and run down, and others it looks active and grand. And I mean, and this goes back to the original Nosferatu. When you think of Dracula, like in the same way that you have kind of what Van Helsing is. When you think of Dracula, it's very charismatic character, a seductive character. You think Lugosi, you think Christopher Lee. It's interesting that what actually starts it all off is this very abnormal and very what you see is what you get. This guy is a vampire. Yeah. And same as it's a challenge in even thinking to remake this film, to try to recreate the visual of Nosferatu. It's very challenging, I would think, to really channel what they had made in that original film, which is I think is so special, and I think is untouchable. I think what they do in this film definitely works, and it's a good rendition. But I just you just can't beat that original. In terms of the visual of Nosferatu and the presence, and so much so that some people had believed that Max Schreck truly was a vampire, right? Which they made a film all about that, which I'd never seen, Shadow of the Vampire. But I think you said you'd seen it, right, Adam?
Yeah, it's hard to track down. I own a DVD of it, but it's not streaming. You can't even rent it on Amazon or anything. So you have to find it at a library or online. But it's a really good movie, worth watching. Great performances from John Malkovich and Willem Dafoe. Dafoe plays Max Schreck, and it's really, really it's a hyperbolic rendition of the production of that film, but it gives you a good idea of what filmmaking was like at the time and how experimental, and guerrilla style filmmaking it was. And F.W. Murnau is an obsessive guy, much like Herzog himself, and he made this film illegally, and he overpromised, what he could do. But it ultimately got the film made. And I do love the look of the vampire because, to your point, Taylor, it's in most versions of Dracula we've seen, he's meant to be very suave and seductive. We generally see one version of this character, and then it's revealed later on what a monster he is.
Right.
With it's fascinating to strip that varnish completely away and see how people react to his appearance and try to basically just move past it and act like everything's fine and act like nothing's going to happen. And I like how no matter how weird it gets, no matter how much this guy floats through a room or acts like an animal or licks people's blood, they're just like, okay, but the real estate deal, like the old house you want, like this guy's got money, so like they keep an open mind.
I do love that setup, and it's present in the original. I mean, that's the kind of the Dracula thing too. But I do love that Nosferatu, or Dracula in this instance, does go through the correct legal channels to acquire property as part of his grand scheme to like eradicate the population of Europe. He's like, well, we're gonna sign the contract. We're gonna get a estate broker out here. We're gonna put him up for a few days. We'll talk shop.
I'll try to have to wait for escrow.
He's gonna cut his thumb. I'm gonna make shit really weird for a while.
That's a more interesting film, is watching him go through the whole real estate process, watching him wait through escrow and everything.
I love his patience in it. I love that he takes his time and doesn't just go, shit, get these coffins. I'm gonna go to Europe and I'm just gonna party. He's like, no, I'm gonna make sure I have a place to stay.
I love all the coffin footage. I just gotta say, like, I just love the utility of, like, he's just like, I'm strong, so I'm just gonna haul coffins around, and we get to watch. And it's just a very practical.
Watching him go from the boat and grab a coffin and just.
And he seems so, he's like, this is like so old hat for him. He's like, oh, okay, here we go.
Yeah, that's when he needs Renfield. Like, he needs help around. He's got to do all of it by himself. And let's say it, Nosferatu, dude's jacked. He's on coffee full of rats across town with no problem. He's not breaking a sweat. He's another one over my shoulders. Run across town.
I love that shot of just him like sprinting across. He just like takes off with his like his cape's like flapping. I'm like, what is he doing?
I fucking love that scene. That's where I'm at mentally. Nosferatu running down the street
of a plague-infested town.
I was watching this while Jessica, my girlfriend, was sleeping, and the shot of towards the back half of the film, once the plague has started and there's nobody out, and where there's just a shot of him hauling ass down the street. Yeah, and it's like he's not going anywhere. He's just wilding out. He's just got nobody. His hands are out, and he's just partying. I just shrieked in laughter. So I woke her up. She was like, "What?" She rolled over and went, "What?" He's just having a great time. Like, I was so happy for Nosferatu. Because he's very sad in this movie. It's nice to see him happy for a change. And also, what's going on, Shug? Great to see you. Great to see you in the chat. It's true. We do have a coyote in the house, and Jessica, the girlfriend, is amazing. That's true. Thank you, Shug. What's going on with you, Shug? How you doing? Did you watch Nosferatu? I got a feeling you didn't. I think this film is even still too scary for you. I'd
love to see him and Ferris do like a commentary track, like completely cold, like not having seen it before. See what they have to say.
Oh, she does remember that. She said she thought that scene was fun. Yeah. I thought it was awesome because in any case, yes, Nosferatu at this kind of a bummer, but like more characterization than isn't really present in the original. From the I recall, he just kind of is this menacing manifestation of the plague and pestilence and disease taking over. And this he's actually got sort of a characterization to him, which he speaks in these soliloquies about time and being so lonely, and how death is, death would be the release from the prison he's trapped in his whole endless life. And I was very surprised to bring this sort of tragic element to, not just a vampire, but Nosferatu is this ghoulish beast,
I know. I love what Kinski brought to the role in that regard, because there is a sadness and more of a depth to him. In the original film, he's more of a force of nature, which is really, really frightening. Like, he just seems like an unstoppable force. In this, he seems very, very manipulative, very calculated, and it seems like he's been wronged at some point in his life. And it's not enough for him to live off of the blood of others. He wants to wipe out entire cities at a time for the hell of it. And that's really, really sinister, like releasing these rats and dead bodies into the streets. And I love how there's like this gallows humor to it, which is very common with Herzog, like for them to drag that body around, and they're having the little town council meeting, and then they're reading through the diary, and they get to the part where like, could it be the plague? And then they all look over at the body, and then they all look at each other, and then they all start running out the door. That part felt very Monty Python.
Yes. Yeah. There was that in towards the end, once Helsing's killed, staked Nosferatu, and they just there's like 4 people in the town government left, and he's just arguing with that one guy and that very misshapen little old man, and like, arrest the guy. And he's like, I never arrested anybody before. He's like, well, get somebody else to do it. Everybody's dead. Like, just keeps having an excuse back and forth. Like, it was very like Holy Grail, arguing with the peasant in the mud type of dialogue. There are a couple like genuinely funny moments. I remember something very small that got me too was when Nosferatu's, doing his scheme and carrying the coffins. He does pass through a church at one point, and there's a crucifix on the wall, and just very, very quietly does like a Doesn't pay it too much mind, but does make sure to get it in there.
Yeah.
See, I think I found the unintentional stuff funny. Like, there's a random goose in like the tavern.
Yeah.
And like when he mentions like the castle, everybody like looks at him, including the goose. And I just lost it. I didn't notice the goose at first until it actually like turns it with everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
I lost it. And also the way he's cutting the bread before he cuts his thumb.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, why are you cutting bread that way?
It's exactly how he cuts it in the original film, like an idiot. Like that, I love that's a shot for shot right there, because that's always like bothered me in the original. I'm like, why is he cutting bread that way? And this one, like, they double down on it. It's like, okay. Yeah, he's just looking for it.
You brought the bloodthirst on yourself for cutting bread that way. Fucking moron.
Yeah. Jessica also loved the immediate annoyance with Renfield. Yeah, that part was great. I felt like we talked about it too. It was very like what we do in the shadows, kind of like, just annoyance with your familiar. Like, gonna find more choices.
That's how I feel with kids.
Children in general when they approach you. Galaxy Geeks in the chat. Do we know the original history of the character? Yeah, we discussed a little bit so far, but yeah, I mean it's got this very fascinating history. It is kind of the original movie vampire, and I would love to talk about the performance here of Nosferatu as well, because it really is. There's sort of this, I don't even know. There's something in the cadence of how he talks. I think it's not your typical Dracula performance, but something about the way he seems like he talks like a person who has all the time in the world. Like he takes his sweet time to kind of get to the end of the sentence, or speaks in a very poetic language, which is kind of how a lot of people do talk in the film. Like we had said, it's got this sort of dreamlike quality where it doesn't feel like an average, Wednesday you're walking through town and this is how people talk. I also loved the scene of like the 5 villagers left in town having a grand feast in the middle of the street and they're like, we all got the plague. Sit down, lady. Like,
enjoy.
I as much of a bother as it was, and it sounds like Herzog had his own means to get this performance to work on film by quite literally fighting him, to the finish line here. I gotta say, I did enjoy, and Jess brought it up earlier too. She was surprised when Nosferatu spoke, because obviously not something the silent film could have achieved, at least not having an audio track. So that's a decision too, right? Is figuring out what that character is going to actually sound like in dialogue. That's something Herzog actually gets to innovate in the story and with those characters. Yeah,
I feel like there was a lot of thought put into that, and I feel like Kinski really made an effort to speak as someone who isn't around people often, and B has seen so much that it's just an effort to even care about talking about it. Mm-hmm. Like it's very it's like, it kind of reminded me a little bit of the Ents in Lord of the Rings and how they have to warm up again to like be able to like converse, just because they're out of the habit. And I like that everyone kind of gets hypnotized by him, but not in the sexy way. Yeah, like they can't look away. They can't break eye contact when they're listening to him. We haven't talked much about Lucy Isabel at Johnny. It's either at Johnny or at Yanni. I'm not sure, but she gives a great performance. Horror fans might know her from Possession as well, the film with Sam Neill. She's just got a very recognizable face and just those giant eyes, and she herself seems like she's from the silent era of acting. And I really like her scenes with Kinski, especially because those feel like they're ripped right out of that era, and they feel like they're completely on the same wavelength.
Yeah, they've got this weird kind of romantic tension and chemistry, even though this is a rendition where Dracula isn't so seductive or alluring in a conventional sense. There is still this weird tension and hypnotism that's happening there, where like she even having never met him before, just like sensing him in dreams and these surreal visions, that by the point they actually do meet face to face, she doesn't even seem that horrified to see him anymore. It's like she knew inevitably he would show up. And I love, this might be the shot of the movie for me, that whole sequence where she's, looking in the mirror on the door. We see that great, Nosferatu shadow, and the door opens, but no one's there. And I'm so dumb sometimes. I was like, wait, what's going on? And Jessica was like, oh yeah, he doesn't have a reflection. I was like, oh yeah, like he's a vampire. I was so like, wow, this is a weird little scene that's happening. Oh yeah, he's right there. When it clicked to me, I was like, oh, that's fucking genius though. What a cool way to have that guy enter a room. Like, what a great little in-camera trick they did there. The door and the shadow, and then him, you're not seeing him until she physically turns around to see him, was so good. I was like, oh man, now that is a filmmaker right there, getting creative with
I love the lighting in this film. Really love it. He uses a lot of natural lighting, but just the way he's able to achieve some of that shadow work, and he's also able to get some amazing shots of Kinski just kind of absorbed in black. They do the classic listen to the children of the night, what music they make, with where it's just like him. He kind of looks like that creepy shot of Pazuzu from The Exorcist, where he's just like the floating head in the darkness.
So Connor looks like right now. If you turn out the rest of the lights in your room, Connor, like that, you would be Pazuzu super hard right now. That's a verb. And he also, in that same sort of sequence back at the castle, he does also lay it on a little thick himself in the way Renfield does, which I recall there's something like this is in the original film, but when looking at a picture of Lucy, he remarks, oh, what a beautiful throat. And I was like, all right, dude. Like, that's not a normal thing to say. Like, clearly you don't have a lot of visitors anymore. You don't know how to talk to people.
I also love, as soon as he sees the picture, he's like, I will sign. And like, Jonathan doesn't even question it. Like, he just saw the picture of your wife, and then he says, I would like to sign, please. And then he's like, well, we haven't discussed the price. He's like, it's a matter among gentlemen. It's not an issue. It's just like, he's like, I want to come eat your wife. All right. Like, just let me do it. I've made up my mind. I love how matter of fact he is, which at his age makes sense.
Right. And again, I just love the formality of him going through the trouble, even when his plan seems. He's so civilized up till the very edge of when he's releasing rats into the streets to kill everybody. He's trying to be so proper and correct about it, and Harker, man, like that dude's tolerance for nonsense is unreal. Like, he really is trying to seal the deal and get the signature, when this guy's like he's
trying to get that money, trying to get that sweet commish.
I guess so. If the
yeah.
if the price is good enough, if the check's big enough, you'll tolerate this weirdo trying to suck blood out of your hand.
Well, Renfield.
I gotta say, I do work with commission. If I was selling something at my job and I cut my finger and some pale, bald-headed weirdo was like backing me down in a corner trying to suck my thumb as it was bleeding, I'd be like, get the fuck out of here.
What if he was going to buy a new iPhone?
I don't give a shit.
I think Harker was in line to get like if you adjust for inflation, roughly the equivalent of like a $50,000 commission or something.
Oh yeah, yeah. Go ahead. If I got $50,000 off of like an iPhone, I'd be like, yeah, go ahead and suck my thumb.
And this is after oh god, and the Count is like, how long does it take to get to Wismar? And he's like, 4 weeks. And even the Count's like, fuck. Like, I don't. Okay.
Gotta sit my ass in a coffin for 4 weeks and don't come out. This is gonna be so boring.
Better find a ship full of idiots to kill for my entertainment.
Yeah. And I love he stays in that castle for several days, and it just has the worst go at it. But I love it. Feels like, you know, he's having these weird dreams and visions, but it feels like, you know, he wakes up out of it, and, you know, there's Nosferatu. It feels like waking up from a dream into a different dream. Like that's the ride he's going on. He can just never get out of normalcy. If he's not dealing with Nosferatu, he's dealing with the kid at the violin in the courtyard. What's his deal? No time to unpack that. On to the next thing. Like, he's just having the roughest week hanging out with these guys.
Yeah, not to mention like he takes that horrible fall. Like he the sheets aren't long enough and he falls at the end, and then he just wakes up to that kid trolling him with the violin.
Oh yeah, just playing the violin. I'd be like, dude, can you shut the fuck up and help me? You've been playing this violin all goddamn week. Like, put it down and help me. Like, flip the disc.
Yeah, he really is chasing that bag, you know. Your tolerance for the worst things ever. But I just love, and then you get to where the movie really picks up is once everything's signed and Nosferatu's on his way, you know. Harker sees him in the coffin. He really takes up to that point for him to seemingly admit to himself, I think this guy's a vampire. Oh man, I just sold this vampire a house in my neighborhood. I got to get home and deal with this.
There goes the neighborhood.
God, I love the scene where he's in his room at the inn, and that lady comes in. She's just like mumbling in a foreign language, and she's like hands him the necklace, and he's like, "No, I don't want it." She like puts it back on and hands him the book, and he's like, "No," and she like just pushes it back, and she like mumbles on her way out, and he's just like, "Okay, I guess I'll read this," and then he's just like reading out loud all the horrible things about what Nosferatu is, and he's like, "Well, yeah, I guess I'll still go to the castle." Like he's not a critical thinker, Jonathan. He's really just trying to get the money. That's all he's thinking about. That's
a fair point. At a certain level, when do you stop feeling bad for somebody who so stubbornly heads into when an entire town is pleading with you, like, oh yeah, people up there go missing all the time, or if they come back, they're never the same. He's a literal monster. And he's like, I don't know, man. I'm just gonna get up there and I'm gonna walk for another 2 weeks up to that castle and chase those funds and get a weird escort in the middle of a cave rides up and gives me a ride.
I love that shot though.
Yeah.
Where he's like walking along like the water, and it's got that backlight from behind the cliff. And that carriage arrives. So cool. All the locations in this, Herzog was always so good about like finding existing locations. Mm-hmm. So I don't know specifically where it was in the Czech Republic, but I know the shots of the castle with the Count and Jonathan all happened in an existing castle or chateau in the Czech Republic, which is cool. And then just all those amazing shots of the mountains, and you get a real sense of scale in this. And they're very, very good once you get to the actual town, which is the stand-in for Wismar, that's a town in Germany, but what they shot was in the Netherlands. But like they did such a good job of just clearing it out, and like I'm sitting there like I can't help it, like inspecting for telephone lines and things like that, right. And it is impeccable. They did such a good job with this. Yeah,
it really has like that historical drama quality to it, just throwing a vampire into the mix. It's like it's got that seal of quality and that legitimacy, but also being a horror film, which also just, you know, seeing his eye, you know, being very involved in like documentary film and you know, knowing how to frame real settings and nature settings and how to incorporate that into his film, and then get somebody like that to make a horror film, just already fascinating in general. Because I'm not completely familiar with his filmography, but I feel like a horror film is kind of an outlier compared to the rest. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong there, at least conventionally speaking, you know. especially a monster movie like this.
It's rare for him.
Yeah. Just seeing like his sensibilities and how he would apply that to something like this in this kind of story. I think it's very interesting to see, you know, where his fascination lies. And you'd mentioned earlier Lucy, who really has a lot more agency in this than I recall in the original.
Love the way they changed the way they enhance the ending rather of the original film by what they include in this.
Yeah.
With her character.
She gets to kind of, again, you know, Helsing is almost an afterthought, and she's kind of, she becomes more of the protagonist by the end, and more of
he's a wet noodle. He's nothing.
and Harker's just borderline zombie by the time the movie, you know, he comes home and doesn't even remember where he was going in the first place. He, you know, shows up and can hardly speak, can't remember who she is, which I love that. As soon as that revelation becomes clear, she passes out. It's like, oh man, we got a mess in our hands here. It's the pure shock and terror of finally seeing your man, and he forgot who you were. You're like, well, I got to get some rest now.
Is that what it was? Because I thought he did like a motion and then like made her pass out.
Oh no! Oh, I mean, that's interesting.
He like waved his hand in front of her, and then she was like.
He's like, maybe it was like, he's like, who is this woman? I don't, yeah, I appreciate that when he comes back, he's basically useless, but, it's not about him or Van Helsing saving the day in this movie.
Yeah.
And it's traditionally, the climax of Dracula is Harker and Van Helsing and Morris and Arthur, like that, all the men get together and hunt down Dracula, you know, and they're very tough. In this, they don't know what they're doing. They're stumbling over each other, and it's Lucy who you know digs into it and ultimately puts herself at risk for a chance to even have a chance to kill this vampire.
Yeah, and has this very sort of strange relationship with them where it's not very antagonistic for a while, right? Like she's paranoid and you know haunted by visions of him all throughout the film, but you know once he gets there, they have these sort of civil dialogues with one another. Like when she whips around, I was talking about that amazing mirror shot later. You know, my expectation was she would see him and shriek and be horrified and run to the corner of the room, and you know, but it's very patient. She's like not surprised that he's there. I don't think she ever really screams aside from her nightmares when she wakes up. But it's like by the time he gets there, she's already, it feels like sort of accepted her role in all of this, and that she's going to have to be the one to stop this guy because everyone else is totally failing wherever Nosferatu is concerned. The men on the ship, the local government, the townspeople, nobody is treating this correctly. You know, nobody's could even begin to comprehend what's actually happening, that a evil vampire is at the heart of all of it. But at every step of the way, no one seems to be able to match this timeless being mentally or strategically, and she's figuring him out from the get-go. But they have this weird sort of civil relationship where they're like giving these very poetic lines to one another, and he's explaining, you know, his philosophy and his burden in life, and she has this sort of understanding empathy for him, which I was, again, and he was that complex, but I was also surprised that was the angle they took instead of, you know, sort of, again, we think of where horror is at this point, you know, obviously like the final girl and all that doesn't really exist conventionally yet, but she doesn't have, it's not that kind of story. They have this weird sort of romantic relationship almost, which everything about it, this film surprised me. Like every just choice that was made surprised me. And I appreciated the weird empathy that they kept coming back for a guy who was doing something so objectively terrible in every way. You know, I really liked their scenes together. And even having seen the original, I really had a sense of like, I have no idea where this is going to go, because it just doesn't have the sort of conventional plot structure, I would think, of a horror film or a monster movie. You don't have the villagers lighting torches, or you don't have anybody sharpening their stakes and getting ready for battle. It's just things are getting worse everywhere, and no one is doing anything about it.
But you know what? I think that's what I think is interesting about this, because I feel like he's been to towns before and he's dealt with the angry mobs. And that's why this time, like, he just has his strategy where he just dumps rats and lets everyone get infected and die off. And, you know, and he can still eat people with the plague. That's not going to hurt him. So, like, you know, he can suck out the blood of some dying people. And what I like with Lucy, though, is it's that scene towards the end where she's wandering through the town square, seeing that, you know, it's just fallen into complete madness and people have given up. And she realizes that even if the vampire doesn't get her, she might die from the plague at this point. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it's well worth risking her life to see if she can hold his attention long enough, you know, essentially until daylight breaks.
Right. And you know, that's something out of course, the original movie. Mm-hmm. But again, just even so, kind of an unconventional way to confront the villain. It's not this grand action scene, or it's not, you know, we're going to trap him and kill him. It comes from an intelligent place and manipulating his own strange fixation on her, weaponizing it against him and outsmarting him, even if it means her own life, to save, you know, basically everyone. I mean, his plan is so interesting to me, in that he's like sending everyone to the grave that he can never go in, right? Like he's tortured by his inability to die, and he just watches the world turn and change in spite of him. So he said, I'm going to put an end to it. If I can't rest, then everybody will have to. And in spite of it all, you know, fell for the thirst trap, Nosferatu. You weren't that smart. You fell for it, as we all have.
Yeah, well, he did, and he becomes like a full animal towards the end there too. That's a hell of a performance there towards the end.
Yeah, he's grabbing a handful of boob.
Well, there's that, but yeah, just like the way he's just moving his neck and everything. He really, you know, put a lot of thought into that. You can tell.
But it's a good point. You joke about it, Connor, but it's a good point. There's this crazy, like, sexual tension to the end scene where, you know, he almost is done, right? He almost steps away, and she's able to kind of coerce him to keep going. And it almost feels like she's kind of into it as well. Like there's this weird other layer to it at the end with the two of them there, you know, waiting for the sun to rise. Very romantic. And he can't help himself. He sits there and he loves it so much. And maybe this is like the closest thing to a genuine connection he's had with someone in maybe hundreds of years, right? Like besides that fucking slug Renfield. God, we hate that guy.
Yeah, watching that, I was like, oh God, I hope that's not what I look like. I'm bald, pale, tall and lanky. Like I really hope that's not what I look like.
That's not what you look like when you lurk above somebody in their bed at night. Well, you've accentuated it tonight. So if you were trying to avoid the comparison, I'm sorry to tell you, you've only underlined it today. You look great. Nothing to be ashamed of.
How are your nails?
I've been under a lot of stress, so they're very short.
Okay, but you don't have the full Nosferatu claws.
No.
Okay.
You need the claws. Those claws look so great just anytime it's the shadows, right? That's what's so great about the original too. But I feel like you just have so much fun finding interesting ways to cast that shadow against different backdrops and scenes. And I mean, that's what sells it all, right? There's nothing more ominous and sinister than Nosferatu creeping out with his claws, you know, from behind you with that shadow. That'll always give me the chills. And then, something else they change in this from the original ending is Now, the original Nosferatu is famously what kind of solidifies the idea of vampires dying in the sun, because I believe in the original novel, they're weakened by it, they avoid it, they only come out at night, but they aren't cast into flames by it, which is something that the silent film had done. That's how they defeat him at the end. He poofs into some flames on the ground. And this, it does kind of stick to the source material where it subdues him. And then old Grandpa Helsing has to like get out of his chair at the end and go, all right.
He really drags his feet. And it's so funny because he's like, oh, do I have to? And the bizarre fallout from him coming down the stairs with that bloody steak. And just the inherent comedy to that.
It's such a choice.
Way to end it.
It's such a choice to not show him stab Dracula right with the steak.
The whole ending, I was like taken aback by. One, he doesn't like burst into flames. He's just like, oh fuck, son, and then like passes out. And I was like,
but his eyes go completely white, which I find interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I can relate. I fucking hate going out in the sunlight. So I can relate to that. Like, I'm not bursting into flames, but I wish I could just lay down in a corner, curled up, anytime I see the sunlight. But yeah, I was pleasantly surprised that they didn't like jump to that bursting into flames. So I was shocked by that. And then Van Helsing's just like, fuck.
Part of me
deal with that.
Part of me wanted to, same way that Werner Herzog wanted to see the baby. Part of me did want to see, with a 70s horror film with a little more money and potential behind it, effects wise. I kind of did want to see him just lit ablaze into a scorched corpse by the end. I thought that would be a really satisfying ending. But what they do is, I just feel like it's such a choice to have Helsing go up there, kill him off screen, and then come back with this giant steak just covered in blood, where it's like, holy shit, what did you do up there, old man? there is some weird physical comedy to the whole like last 2-3 minutes of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And he's basically, all the, like you said, all the hard work's been done for him. Lucy's the one who figured out how to defeat Dracula and save their entire the continent, if not the entire populace of the earth.
Mm-hmm.
Old Grandpa Helsing goes up there and cleans up and is going to get all the credit. Although I guess he's going to go to jail for it, which is also funny that after all this, after killing a vampire who unleashed a plague upon your nation, he's going to go to jail for it.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Depends on if the constable can haul him into town or not.
Yeah. And then it just kind of wraps up. It's a very strange ending and a very strange movie.
Well, let's not forget what happens to Jonathan.
Right. Oh, yes. You're right. That's the most interesting thing about the
end. And how Lucy blocks him with, she breaks up the consecrated host from communion, boxes him in like the witches with salt from Hocus Pocus, and he can't move from the chair. And I love how the maid's there, and he's like, "Look at this mess! This place is falling apart. What's going on here?" And he just gets up and just finally moves out of the circle. And I like how practical vampires are in this world. Like, they're not like trying to make a big show out of things. They're just trying to, survive the way they know how.
Yeah. And that's a different layer to it as well. Just correct me if I'm wrong, because I can't remember if within original Dracula, and I don't think in the original Nosferatu, it ends with Harker being a vampire. Am I wrong about that?
Okay. No, that was a Herzog take.
And it's an interesting layer to it, because for me, not only is he a vampire, but he's, very obviously physically becoming like Nosferatu, even to the point where I wonder, like, is there some weird transference of mind and body? Like, is there some weird spiritual transfer happening here where maybe it's not even he's turning into a vampire so much as he's literally just turning into Nosferatu? Because, that's a very iconic look. And instead of him just also being a vampire, he is also taking on all those physical qualities and has the iconic 2 teeth rather than just sort of the mandibles.
Right.
He's becoming just like him, and it is one of those great endings that makes you go like, man, I just want to know what the next day is. Like what happens though, like right when the cameras stop rolling, because I kind of need to see what plays in next. Like, does he can pick up the plague where it left off? Like now Lucy's not there to stop him. There's like 4 people in town. Even his grand nemesis is being hauled off to jail, and even if he wasn't, he's probably going to be dead from natural causes in a few weeks anyway. It's like there would never be another one or anything like that. But is
Renfield still on the loose?
Right. Renfield we never get that reaction to his beloved getting absolutely demolished with a stake. We never get to see how he feels about that.
Yeah. Also, like, it doesn't observe a lot of the traditional rules. Like, you wonder, like, oh, if you kill the main vampire, does that mean Jonathan's going to be okay? Apparently not. Like, it really had set in. When you brought up like the ability for special effects, I thought of the same thing, but it's in keeping with his style, because Herzog's always been very interested in just showing what is physically possible. And that lends an extra layer of like realism, I think, to this, where like, we are told that he can shapeshift, and we see bats and stuff. And I love the footage of the bats in this.
Yeah.
I love the stock footage of the bats in slow motion. I also like the scene where that giant ass bat is in Lucy's room.
Right.
But we don't see even in camera effects any superimposition. We don't see anything like that. It's all implied, which I think is really interesting. And it gives it a real rawness. Also, we hadn't mentioned it all. This film's got a hell of a score. This is it is a very remarkable score. And people can listen to it on Spotify or any other streaming service if they like it. But it's very, very haunting and hypnotic. But it's got also a lot of throwback music. Like there's some theremin in there, that makes me think of like 40s and 50s movies a lot.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what helps it feel so sort of strange and timeless too. It just feels like it's existing in its own reality. It doesn't have kind of the typical hallmarks of like a 70s film or 70s score. It keeps it in its own weird, surreal, nightmarish realm, so to speak. And that's a great call out, because I hadn't mentioned the score yet either. It is really great and complimentary to the film. And I had a blast with this one. I had no idea what to expect. Obviously, I knew what Nosferatu was, but to come in and see it from a, now by today's standards, not a contemporary standpoint, but a much closer to being contemporary standpoint than a 20s silent film. It was really interesting to see the story, especially from someone like an auteur, right? Like Herzog. You wouldn't just want to see anybody do this. If you were going to pull Nosferatu out of the dirt, you want to make sure somebody has a genuine take on it. And like you had mentioned earlier, something that's been proposed a lot lately is that Robert Eggers is going to do a rendition of this character, has been talking about it for years. And like, I really can't think of anybody else right now making movies that I probably rather see try this material. Just his sensibilities and his penchant for genuine dialogue and set design and story relative to the era that which it's taking place. And God, I would just love to see what that guy has in mind, where he thinks, oh, I've got a take on this that would be worth making, Yeah.
And I also think what he nails in his films is just, he takes a known aspect of mythology and he makes it feel lived in and elemental and old. In a very genuine way. And the idea of him using the Nosferatu iconography, Nosferatu as an adaptation is inherently German. That's very important to this particular version of the story. And that's why Herzog took so much pride in it. He made the film. It was very patriotic for him in a lot of ways, and he has a lot of respect for the original film, as you mentioned earlier. And I think Eggers, regardless of whether or not he's of German descent, I think he would appreciate the legacy of this film, and I would expect it to be filmed in Germany to some extent, and that would have to be an imprint on this version of the story, because we all know the story of Dracula. Nosferatu is just a little bit different, and it's that inclusion of the plague, and it's the reversal of who's responsible for taking down the monster that really distinguishes it, in my opinion.
Yeah, and you think of what he did with the pieces of like an occult story and the genuine era of witch hunts and that sort of paranoia in sort of puritanical American society, and finding an interesting story to tell inside of that, and then what he could also do with would he tell a very supernatural story where he tells something more grounded and find an interesting angle. I've also read that Anya Taylor-Joy is supposed to come back, and part of me almost wonders like maybe that have her play Nosferatu, like that's such an interesting actress, find that angle to tell a kind of different sort of story, and maybe what a feminine read on that character is and how that would play out. That's just my own speculation. I have no idea what she's. Maybe she's Lucy. That's the more obvious one, right? But yeah.
Sorry, but like I know Willem Dafoe is in the movie he's filming now, The Northman, the Viking horror film that I cannot wait to see. And so, not outside the realm of possibility, Willem Dafoe could play the actual character that he played the actor. That would be amazing.
Yeah,
I mean, he'd be perfect for the role.
Right. I'd watch him in anything, and he's built from the ground up for something like that. A ghoulish performance that would be no challenge, I think, for him to tap into. I'd be interested to hear from you, Adam, too, because you picked this film out, and obviously have a lot of passion for it. In regards to also the potential of seeing another one of these movies in the near future, how do you? Looking back, what is your thoughts on the long-term legacy of Nosferatu and its implications for horror and vampire stories and how it holds up? And it's not something that comes up as often as a traditional Dracula, but like I said earlier, when you see it, you know what it is, and there's just some special quality to it that keeps it timeless and respected and revered through the years.
I think what's interesting about it is because it codified like the cinematic vampire. I think that's why like Count Orlok, or as we affectionately refer to him a lot of the time, Nosferatu, is the granddaddy of them all. That's why in the adaptation of Salem's Lot, in the book, that vampire is basically supposed to look like a normal person, like a little gaunt, a little old, but not like Nosferatu. But I love that like Tobe Hooper wanted to make it a direct homage to that vampire and show you that the look of something that looks like that is truly dangerous. And then on the comedic side of things, What We Do in the Shadows, the oldest vampire that lives in the house looks like Nosferatu. I love that.
I think his name is Peter too, which I love.
Yeah. And you just see the lasting legacy of the way this thing looks. I want to talk about something that's available to watch, but I don't want to spoil it for people. We'll talk about it offline because I think you guys have watched it too. But I definitely saw the impression of Nosferatu in a recent series. So I think we keep coming back to it because it's distinct from Dracula. Yes, it's the Dracula story, but it's like if you watch Dracula with the They Live glasses on. Yeah. And you can't delude yourself into thinking that this is all okay.
Yeah. There's just something different and something special about that interpretation of a vampire, and you don't see it often, but when you do, you can't help but appreciate that legacy is being kept alive, and somebody else is taking a risk with that version of Dracula or Nosferatu or the vampire. I love it. And I love that we had an opportunity to finally talk about, I think, what is still maybe an underappreciated or underrated horror character and story. Obviously, everybody knows Dracula, but to go back to truly the beginning, it doesn't get more classic than Nosferatu. So I'm really happy we had the opportunity to talk about this character in these films, and thank you so much for bringing them to us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm so glad you guys got something out of it, because I know this movie may not be everyone's cup of tea. It's very slow and ponderous, but that's kind of what you're signing up for with Herzog films, and I think it's a necessary bit of counter programming to a lot of vampire films from that era.
Yeah. Especially when you're coming off of the Hammer horror days, and Christopher Lee, he's been playing the character for like almost 20 years probably by the time this came out. And you're right, challenges the conventions of what people would consider to be a vampire movie. And also, again, horror is an interesting place in the late 70s, but still this feels pretty atypical for its time, and that it's depending on your own tastes and preferences, you can almost even argue whether it's a horror film just based on how it approaches the subject matter and presents it. And really doesn't fall into like even for the 70s, some of the cliches that, a scary movie would be signed up for, right? It's just a lot more patient and thoughtful and yes, even funny at times. You can't help but laugh at some choices, but I think some are intentional even. So no, I thought it was an awesome movie. I'm glad to have finally seen it, and I'm glad to have talked about one of the all-time greats of Nosferatu. So this is perfect, man. Is there anything before we wind down for the night? Is there anything of Nosferatu that we didn't get that we still should have covered?
No, I think we were pretty comprehensive. Check both of these films out because they're available on Tubi, amongst other streaming services. Just let's all hope that Robert Eggers gets to make his version, because I want to see this I want to see this legacy continue, and I think he's the guy to do it.
Yes, 100%. I agree. Perfect. Hey, man, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. It's been
my pleasure.
This has been a really fun one. It's great to finally get you on. Real quick for everybody out there, of course, where can the ghouls and goblins find you on the internet, Adam?
I basically stick to Twitter and Letterboxd at Eisenthor, which I have listed there. And I do a bi-weekly show with Video Drew called Why Are We Like This? This week, we will be doing a deep dive into the Child's Play franchise in honor of the stellar Chucky television series that everyone's loving.
So fucking good.
Yeah, so we wanted an excuse not only to talk about how much we're enjoying that, but to look back on the 7 canonical films and the remake, and really just discuss why we keep coming back to it. But aside from that, I go where I'm invited. So thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. It's been our pleasure for sure. And of course, next week we're streaming live every Thursday at 8:30 on this very channel. Audio goes up the next day on podcast platforms. Next week, we'll be welcoming on our guy, Slick Nick Harley, good friend of mine. Excited to have him on to talk about Prometheus, the Ridley Scott film. But actually be the first of any alien film we've ever covered on this show. So canonically,
very excited for this one.
Yeah, starting at the canonic beginnings. I guess it's only right. That's going to be a lot of fun. And then we'll also have on the 25th, we'll be welcoming on Craig the Barbarian and Jeffrey King Khan, of course, talk about Ready or Not, a modern classic, I think. So that one's going to be a lot of fun too. So come back every Thursday live on this channel, YouTube, Twitch, Thursday nights at 8:30. And as always, you have a beautiful throat. Good night.